Okay, we are talking about absolute value. So make sure that whatever I write, you write as well. And there's going to be a couple practice problems that you need to show me. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to give you a couple problems, a couple examples. So we've looked at adding and subtracting integers, but now we need to be able to do it with absolute values. So our first example, example 1, is negative 8 minus the absolute value of negative 15. Now, in order to do this problem, we have to remember that we have to go with GEMDAS. Okay, so I'm going to write GEMDAS next to my problem so I can make sure that I follow my steps. Grouping symbols is first. Okay, so grouping symbols is where we're starting, and the absolute value signs, these guys here, are considered a grouping symbol. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to solve this. So I'm going to write everything else for my problem. Negative 8 minus, and now I'm going to solve the grouping symbol by saying, what is the absolute value of negative 15? The absolute value of negative 15 is how many hops away from 0 is negative 15? It's 15 hops. So the absolute value of negative 15 is 15. We want to keep going, but again, we have to remember that in algebra, we don't subtract. We add the opposite. So I'm going to change this to addition and change the power to negative. This was a positive 15. Now we're going to change it to the opposite, a negative 15. And we have negative 8 and negative 15, and we're adding them together, which means we have a whole lot of negatives. The signs are the same, so we're going to add. So I'm going to do my math over here, 15 and an 8, and we're adding them together. 8 plus 5 is 13, carry my 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And our answer is 23. Now, is this answer positive or negative? It should be negative, because remember, we had negative 15 of these guys, and then we had 8. And so all together, we have 23 negatives, and we box our answer. Okay. The next problem we're going to do, I'm going to get us a new page here. The next problem we're going to do, example 2, says the absolute value of negative 26 minus the absolute value of negative 4. Okay? And to follow our steps, we have to do our grouping symbols first. So I need to take out my negative 26 from the absolute value sign. The absolute value of negative 26 is 26 minus, and the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. And now we come to the spot where in algebra we don't subtract, we add the opposite. So we have a whole bunch of positives for the 26, and we have a little bit of negatives for the 4, and we need to combine them. So we're adding them together, 26 plus 4, but we're really not adding because we have a whole bunch of positives and only just 4 negatives. Okay, so we're subtracting. We want to make those 0 pairs. So we're subtracting, and we say 6 minus 4 is 2, and 2 minus 0 is 2. So our answer here is 22. And because we've gotten rid of all of these negatives, we're left with the group of positives. So our answer is positive. The 26 is a bigger number than the negative 4, so our answer comes out positive. We box our answer. So this is where you're going to try, and you're going to try to do example 3. Example 3 is the absolute value of negative 17 minus the absolute value of 2 plus a negative 3 times the absolute value of negative 4. And we're going to walk ourselves through the steps. And so we're going to say, let's do our grouping symbols first. The absolute value of negative 17 is a positive 17. Keep our subtraction sign. The absolute value of 2 is 2. Keep our addition sign. Then it's a negative 3 times the absolute value of negative 4. So I have to write my negative 3 times And then I have an absolute value of -4, which comes out as a +4. And according to GEMDAS, we have just finished our grouping symbols, and there are no exponents. So we move to multiplication and division in a left to right fashion. So we're going to say, okay, this is subtraction here, so we're not going to touch it. This is addition here, we're not going to touch it. So we need to touch the multiplication piece. So I'm going to write the rest of it. 17 minus 2 plus, and we don't touch all of the plus and minus parts. We're going to do the -3 times a 4, which is a -12. And now we have finished with all of our multiplication and division. So we're on to adding and subtracting in a left to right fashion. So 17 minus 2 is 15, or we can say we don't subtract, we add the opposite. 17 positives plus 2 negatives is 15 positives plus a -12. And 15 plus -12 is 3. Okay, so we're going to try a couple more samples. This time, our example 4 is going to have some variables. And so one of our samples with our variables says -b plus c. Okay? And over here, it gave us that b is equal to 18 and c is equal to -25. So the first thing we want to do is we want to plug in our values for b and c into our problem. Okay? So I'm going to write equals, and I'm going to plug in the values. Now this negative has to stay. And then the b that gets plugged in is the 18 plus, and the c that gets plugged in is this -25. And now we're going to solve. The only reason I put them in parentheses is to show you what b was and what I dropped in, and that I left my subtraction sign in front of the b. And remember, this is like a -1. A -1 times the b. A -1 times that 18. So I really have -1 times 18 is -18 plus a -25. And now I have negatives plus negatives, which means I'm going to end up with a whole lot of negatives. So I'm going to do my work off to the side. And when I add a whole bunch of negatives to a whole bunch of other negatives, I end up with a negative answer. And 8 plus 5 is 13, carry my 1. And 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So I get 43. And again, they are negatives. Okay? And I have one more example for you, and then I'm going to give you some problems to do on your own. So example 5 says the absolute value of A plus B plus the absolute value of C. And A is equal to -12, B is equal to 18, and C is equal to -25. So I'm going to plug in my values. I have to keep my absolute value signs, but I get to plug in -12 for that A. Plus, my B is 18, so I'm plugging in an 18, plus my C, which is -25, and I have to keep those absolute value signs and then just plug in my -25. And now I'm going to try to do my grouping symbols. First, the absolute value of -12 is 12, plus 18, plus, and the absolute value of -25 is 25, equals. Now I just get to add my numbers, and I'm going to add them in a left to right fashion. They're all positives. So if I want, I can just make a big list. And I can say 12 plus 18 plus 25. 5 plus 8 is 13, plus 2 is 15. 2 plus 3 is 5. Or 2 plus 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. My answer is 55, and they were all positive, so that's a positive answer. Okay, I'm going to write down the problems that I would like you to solve for homework tonight, and then you may bring them in with these notes tomorrow. So problem number 1 is A minus B minus C, and A is equal to -12. B is equal to 18, and C is equal to negative 25. Number 2 is negative 567 plus B minus a negative C plus 400. And use these values as well for problem number 2. Problem number 3 says the absolute value of A plus the absolute value of B times the absolute value of C. Number 4 is going to be negative 4 times the absolute value of B minus 3 times the absolute value of C plus 5 times the absolute value of B. And the 5th one is going to be a challenge one. It's going to have all GEMDAS, exponents, absolute values. Let's try 2 squared minus 3a minus 17 plus c plus 4 times the quantity b minus a plus 2. Make sure to show all your steps. All right, bring the notes on the 5 sample problems as well as these 5 homework problems and your worksheet tomorrow to class.